Welcome everyone to the first of two TA calls that OSEP will be conducting in the month of February. One quick announcement before I introduce today's call. Last Friday, we sent out a letter announcing that OSEP will host its 2024 Combined Leadership Project Directors Conference at the Crystal Gateway Marriott Hotel in Arlington, Virginia, same place it was last year. And the dates are August 6th through 8th. We hope you'll be able to attend this national meeting. Your participation is critical to enhancing your agency's capacity to strengthen relationships with other state agencies, to develop and implement high-quality general supervision, and to improve results for the children that we serve, infants, toddlers, children and youth with disabilities, and their families. For those who need a copy of the letter or need it for documenting your travel, we have posted a copy of that to our website. That's the OSEP Ideas That Work website. If you go there, you should be able to locate it. Now for today's TA call, as mentioned in our call announcement, we'll feature two topics today. First, OSEP will review important requirements for the completion of the FFY 2024 Part B and Part C grant applications. Jennifer Simpson, our program implementation team facilitator, will walk us through this process as she's done for the last several years. Then the second part of the call, Dan Schreier from OSEP's Director's Office will share highlights from the OSEP Office of Education Technology's recently released guidance in support of infants, toddlers, children, and youth with disabilities who may require assistive technology devices and services. The guidance addresses 28 myths and facts related to AT devices and services and is intended for parents, practitioners, and administrators at the state and local levels. So we hope that you are able to participate in both sections of today's call. So we have a lot of material to get through today, and I will turn over the first part of the call to Jennifer Simpson. Jennifer.
Thank you, Greg. Good afternoon, everyone. Lucille Sledger, my colleague, and I will cover a lot of content related to the Part B and Part C application process. And that includes talking about the deadline dates for the submission of the application and your public participation period, highlighting some critical content that you'll see in the application package, and also talking about the actual application templates themselves. Let me begin by saying that we do not have the packages ready to disseminate yet. We are still awaiting OMB approval on the minor revisions we did to the Part C package. We hope to have the OMB approval by the middle to late February timeframe. And as soon as we have those documents ready, we will make them available for you. So in the absence of those documents, we hope that you will find this call helpful, since we don't really have many changes from the documents that we used last year. Now, the application deadline for both Part B and C will be the same date, just as we did last year. This time around, the deadline is May 22nd, 2024. And so the public participation deadline will be March 22nd of this year. And remember, when you're thinking about public participation, it's not just the application itself, but for some of you, if you made revisions to your GEPA Section 427 form, you also have to post that updated form with your application. In addition, if you're a Part C program and you made changes to policies and procedures, those policies and procedures will be posted as well. Now, because we do not have our appropriation for 2024, we cannot provide you with allocation tables. Therefore, you're going to have to use your Section 3 from your 2023 application document when you post for public participation. We don't anticipate having those appropriations in time for you to include that and post your documents to meet the public participation deadline. So that means when you're posting your application documents, you're going to take that interactive spreadsheet, if you're a Part B program, that you used last year, so 2023, and insert that with your other 2024 application materials. And if you're a Part C program, you're going to use that 2023 use of funds. You can just lift the document or lift those sections of your 2023 document and insert them with 2024. You don't have to adjust them. You don't have to try to anticipate what your allocation might be and make those kinds of changes. Just take those documents intact. Once we do release those allocation tables, you'll pull out your 2023 info, update your section 3s, insert the 2024 content, and then continue with the public participation process. You won't have to restart that public participation timeline. Oh, my computer has frozen. Okay, sorry about that. Now, with public participation, remember that the requirement is that you have to have your application out there for your stakeholders to view it at least 60 days prior to your submission of those documents to OSEP. And you have to allow public comment for 30 of the 60-day period. If you are posting policies and procedures, so this pertains to Part C, you need to also hold hearings as part of that public participation process. We have the same flexibilities this year that we did last year with regards to the public participation and submission of your documents. So that means when we're talking about public participation, you can have virtual hearings. You just want to make sure that it is permissible based on your state rules. With the application submission, just as we've done since we had COVID, you can submit your documents electronically. Okay, so you would submit them to us via email using your state government email address, and make sure those documents show a signature for the application. So it could be a Adobe signature, it could be a PDF copy of the signature page. We have a lot of flexibility with that. But in any case, you would send those documents to us via email, followed up with the hard copy documents in August, by August 2nd of this year. And depending upon what we see with the signature pages of those documents, we may ask you to verify the name of the official and the role of the official who's signing the documents. More instructions about that will be in the grant memo that will accompany the grant package. So as most of you know, who've been around for many years, grant packages are pretty standard. So whether you're a Part B or Part C program, you have that grant memo, you have the instructions, the actual application template itself that you populate, and then the new form that we added last year has to do with the updated requirements under GEPA Section 427. Some program-specific documents include the year of age cohort for Part B, and that's a document that explains what your state's rules are regarding FAPE. That's something that we ask you to review every year, because if there are updates, those updates could impact your allocation. So we like to hear about those updates as soon as possible. We also include a checklist. It's about a 100-page document that explains all of the parts of Section 2 of the Part B grant application. And then for our Part C programs, there are documents related to indirect costs. And then we provide links for policy checklists. And those are tools that help you if you need to make revisions to policies, or if you're contemplating new policies such as at risk or the Part C extension option. Now, we had guidance in last year's memo about the Build America, Buy America Act. And so BABAA is the requirement for all federal grantees, which basically says if you're engaging in any type of infrastructure project, which could include construction, for example, you're to source your materials from US-based companies. There are waivers for those requirements though, and we will have links to the waiver information in our application memo. One thing I want to point out that's new, however, pertains to our Pacific Island territories. So for American Samoa, CNMI, and Guam, there is a special waiver provision that operates a little differently than the others, and that information also will be in our grant memo. However, if you have any questions about this, if there's any situation where you think you might be engaging in some type of infrastructure project, please let your state lead know, and then we will make sure to link you to the appropriate guidance and ensure that you have the right materials. Now, GEPA, as you know as well, we revised the requirements around GEPA. This was an agency-wide initiative for all Department of Ed grantees. And GEPA is that provision and section 427 in particular, is the area where you talk about how you ensure equitable access to either your Part C or Part B programs for all persons in your states. With the GEPA form last year, you found that it was expanded. And so instead of 1 to 2 questions, there were actually 4 questions that tried to elicit information from you related to any barriers you identified that might impact equitable access, strategies you were planning to address those barriers, and timelines. So as I said a second ago, if you've made a revision to that form, you must post that form and then submit that form to us with your application materials. If you did not make any revisions, then it's okay. The form you have that you submitted last year remains on file, and you do not need to submit anything this year. However, I would encourage all of you to revisit your documents and in particular look at the timeline area, because if you put timelines there that are expiring soon or have already expired, then you may need to make updates to that form. For our Part B programs and any Part C programs as subgrant, you need to remember that the GEPA 427 requirements also apply to your subgrantees. So you have to make sure when you're reviewing your subgrantee applications, you're also considering the GEPA requirements, and your subgrantee should be using the GEPA 427 forms now with their subgrantee applications. Last year, there was some flexibility about how subgrantees could meet this requirement. Here again, we'll have more guidance about this in the grant memo. For Part C, related to GEPA, you have an actual response in Section 2A. So it's Section 2A, number 12. And remember, last year, we had all Part C programs put new. This time around, you need to look back at your response for Section 2A12. If you're revising your form, you need to check revised, or if you're not making any changes to the form, you need to check on file. If you put the incorrect response for Section 2A12, you will have to resubmit your application with a new signature to us, because this is an item that falls in Section 2, and any changes in Section 2 require a new signature. So we're hopeful that you will get the response correct before you post your documents for public participation, and therefore eliminate the need to have to resubmit your documents with a new signature. We are anticipating being able to offer the state incentive grant for the Part C extension option, again for 2024. However, it hinges upon the appropriation for our programs. As you know, for Part C, if the allocation for the program exceeds $460 million, then that triggers the availability of the state incentive grant. So we're keeping our fingers crossed that it will still be an option that we can offer to you. However, keep in mind that you can always use your regular formula grant funds for the Part C extension option. You do not have to have that SIG to offer the extension or to continue to offer it if you already have an approved policy on file. If you are thinking about the Part C extended option and you want to explore how your state might be able to adopt it, then please let us know no later than May 22nd, which is the application due date, that you want to get some technical assistance on the extension, and we will arrange that for you. Now, one thing I want to bring to your attention, which we are sharing for the first time in this format, is that we want to remind all of our Part B programs, so all of our SEAs, about the National Instructional Materials Accessibility Standard. So in your Part B application, question 23 pertains to this standard, and that's the requirement that you provide accessible instructional materials to students who are eligible to receive those materials. So typically these are students who are blind, visually impaired, or who may have some other type of disability that impacts their ability to use printed materials. All programs have to say yes to this assurance in Section 2 of the Part B application. However, you are also given a choice as to whether you coordinate with NIMAC, which is the National Instructional Materials Accessibility Center, or if you choose not to coordinate with them. For those of you who give a yes response to question 23B1, stating that you coordinate with NIMAC. We just want to remind you that when you are ordering textbooks and other printed materials, either at the state level or if your LEAs are doing this, we want to make sure that you remember your obligations for providing information to publishers regarding the NIMAS standard and ensuring that you provide that information in a timely manner so that they in turn can ensure that those materials are made available for the students that need them. There are 2 guidance documents that are hyperlinked here. So when you access these slides, you will be able to also access these documents. One is a Q&A about the standard itself, about the NIMAS standard. And the other one gives some sample language that you could insert in purchase orders or contracts with publishers as a way to inform them about the requirement to make sure that they provide the NIMAX center with the information needed for them to in turn create those accessible materials. So this is just a friendly reminder about that. We will share more information about this in separate correspondence and an upcoming TA call. Now, this time I'm going to turn it over to Lucille, who's going to talk about the Part B application template. Lucille?
Thank you. Good afternoon. The Part B application is the same format that was used last year, except in the footer, it indicates that it's the federal fiscal year 2024 submission. We'll start with Section 1, submission statement for Part B. In Section 1A, you tell OSEP whether you are asking for full or conditional approval. In Section 1A, check item 1 if you are asking for full approval, or check item 2 if you're asking for conditional approval. Only check item 3 if you are submitting policies or procedures. Section 1B, conditional approval for current grant year. Only use Section 1B if you had a conditional approval last year, federal fiscal year 2023. Use item 1 if OSEP's conditional approval was based on the assurances in Section 2A. And use item 2 if the conditional approval was based on other conditions such as a specific condition. Talk to your state lead if you have questions about the options. For Section 2A, assurances related to policies and procedures. Section 2A is a list of assurances for requirements under Part B. Put a check in the yes or no column for each item in Section 2A. If you check yes, assurance is given. If you check no, assurance is not given, and you must provide a date no later than June 30th, 2025, by which time the state will be able to make assurance. Please talk to your state lead if you have to check no to any of the assurances. Section 2B, other assurances. Section 2B lists additional assurances required for Part B. Only yes responses are permitted. Please contact your state lead if your state cannot check yes to any of the assurances in Section 2B. Section 2C, certifications. Section 2C has 2 certifications that must be checked yes. If the state cannot respond yes for a certification, please contact your state lead. Section 2D, statement. Section 2D is a statement that must be signed by an authorized representative of the state. This can be the agency director or a designated representative. Please print or type the name and title of the authorized representative who signs the statement. Also provide the date when the statement is signed, and sometimes this is left off the application. Please note that the name of the state must be inserted twice in the statement. The name of the state agency is inserted once. And remember that if there are any changes in Section 2, you have to submit a new application for Part B. Now Jennifer will talk about Section 3.
All right, for the Part B application, Section 3 is the use of funds section. This is the area where you would provide a copy of your interactive spreadsheet. I do want to remind you that if you have any trouble populating your interactive spreadsheet, please don't hesitate to let us know. We had several states that had spreadsheets that had issues with them. And we don't want you to try to figure out what's wrong or try to override any errors you have or try to make the fix yourself. Many times when things like that happen, it's not just one state that's impacted, but it's multiple states. So if you find when we share the allocation information that your state-specific interactive spreadsheet has some issues, then please let your state lead know, or you can send an email to me. Now, because of the holdup with our allocations for 2024, you want to make sure again that you are inserting your 2023 interactive spreadsheet for the purposes of public participation until we release those 2024 allocations. Then you'll make the switch with the information to include your 2024 interactive spreadsheet. And then remember too, there's an additional requirement here. You're supposed to also describe how you solicit LEA input on your interactive spreadsheet. We have many states that neglect to include that information, and we have to circle back and try to get it. So please remember to include that as well with your interactive spreadsheet. Section 4 of your Part B application pertains to any state-imposed rules that you may have that are not required under IDEA. If you are a state that does have state-imposed rules, you're supposed to include those in this area. However, if you don't have state-imposed rules, then it's important for us to know that too. So please denote that on the application template itself. And then with Section 5, MFS, Maintenance of State Financial Support, this is a chart that must be signed by an authorized representative of your fiscal office or your state budget officer. And on this document, every state must complete the first chart that appears there. So that chart shows the total amount of state financial support made available for special ed and related services for state fiscal years 2022 and 2023. And if you also make that calculation on a per capita basis, you would complete the first chart and also include information in the second chart. Section 5B of the Part B application pertains to significant disproportionality. So back with the 2022 applications, we had all Part B programs submit a SIG Dispro form. Just like with the GEPA form, you only need to submit an updated document to us if you've made a change in methodology, your risk ratios, or anything else pertaining to your calculation for significant disproportionality. Otherwise, the form that we received back in 2020 is the form that we have on file for you. If you need any instructions about this or guidance, then please reach out to your state lead and we'll be sure to connect you with the appropriate resources for this. Now on to Part C. With Section 1 of the application template for Part C is very similar to what you have for the Part B document. Same thing, this is where you're telling us if you're applying for full approval, meaning you're making a yes response to all assurances in your document, or if you are applying for a conditional approval, meaning somewhere in Section 2, you're giving a no response and including a date by which you are anticipating meeting the requirement. The latest date you can provide would be June 30th, 2025. And then for option 3 here, if you're submitting policies and procedures with your application, then you would denote that as well. Again, for our Part C programs, if you are revising policies now, if you're thinking about it, please give your state lead a heads up. We review policy drafts while documents are posted for public participation. So we encourage you to send drafts to us, or at least schedule a TA call so that we can talk through what you're planning to revise. In some cases, if the revision is not a substantive one, you may find that you don't need to engage in public participation. So that's the kind of helpful guidance we can provide to you as you're thinking about any changes you might make. Now, with the other section of Section 1 of your Part C application, so the bottom of the page gets at 1B, where if you received the conditional approval last year with your grant application, then we expect to see a response here. If you got a full approval last year, then nothing is needed in the area of Section 1B. Just like with the Part B application, if your conditional approval was related to assurances in section 2A, then you would give the appropriate response in section 1B, number 1. If your conditional approval was due to some other issue, so something that may have been flagged through specific conditions or something else, then your response would be in section 1B, number 2. This is one area where the Part C application looks very different from the Part B document, and this is section 2. This is where you're giving us a yes or no response related to policies and procedures. And the yes column has 3 options there. You can say if something is new, if it's on file, or if it's being revised. Here, if you're given a no response, remember the date can be no later than June 30th, 2025. Also keep in mind that if you have to make changes to responses here after submitting the application, then you would need a new signature. So that's why we encourage you to talk with your state lead to get guidance before you submit your final document. So if you need to change a response, then you can do so and be assured that you won't have to go back and get another signature in this area. Section 2B has yes or no responses. Here again, if you have to give a no response, then you would put a date in that no column. However, these are key assurances with the Part C program. So any no response is one where you would want to inform your state lead that you're going to have to say a no so that we can talk with you further about the reasoning behind that. Section 2C, certifications. You see, no is not an option here. You don't even have that column. So we expect all programs to be able to respond yes. And these are requirements related to your financial responsibilities with the Part C program, making assurances that you're not using IDA funds for lobbying purposes and so forth. And so if for some reason you can't say yes to any of these, you need to inform your state lead. And then finally, with the signature page, the state name appears in 2 areas at the top. Also on that line where you give us the state name and the name of the agency. So make sure you include those. Give us the name and title of the individual signing the document. So whether that's the lead agency director or their designee. Make sure you include a date with the signature. Many times we have to get a new application document because the date has been omitted. And then always keep in mind that any changes to section 2 will need a new signature here. Now, section 3, the use of funds section for Part C. This is the area in section 3A where you tell us about positions within the lead agency that are those state positions tied to administration of the program and any roles or positions tied to your ICC. And so we expect you to have all columns completed. So you're telling us the number of positions that are 100% funded or less than 100% funded with federal Part C funds, the percentage of time those roles spend on the Part C program, giving us dollar amounts for salaries and fringe benefits, and then a description of duties. All Part C programs have to complete this area, and we ask you to expand it as needed. So if you need a second page, need to add more rows, you can certainly do that with this part of the application template. The same thing applies to section 3B. If you need to make additional rows here, you can do so. And so here, you're going to label items as being tied to different activities in the state, and whether it's a lead agency activity or something tied to your ICC. Typical things we see here are things related to child find, public awareness materials. Sometimes people put database updates here. You want to make sure that for each thing listed, you specify the amount of funds you anticipate using for that activity. And then also let us know if it's an activity that requires OSEP prior approval. And we have links within this section of the application template and links that I'll show you at the end of the presentation where you can refresh your memory on those requirements tied to prior approval. So if you're planning to charge rent, if you're using money for construction, money for participant support costs, meaning training funds for persons who are not state staff, those are examples of the typical prior approvals that we get from states. When in doubt, just ask your state lead. Now, this area, direct services, is one where we provided additional instructions in a grant memo last year. Now, with the revisions to the Part C template, where we're awaiting OMB approval, we've embedded those instructions in the actual template itself. So you'll see that this page looks slightly different from last year's application template in the narrative section. So here, same thing as last time. You're going to provide a description of the early intervention service. So if it's occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech, you list those out and tell us the approximate amount you anticipate using for those services when you're thinking about your federal Part C funds. However, if those amounts include dollars for activities other than direct services, you have two options, which are explained in the instructions in this section. You could put a footnote next to that dollar figure and just specify in a footnote that the dollar figure includes money for additional activities outside of direct services. Or if you want to, you can put the dollar figure that's attributable to direct service here, and then funds to contractors for any other activities could be listed in the previous section, section 3B. So two options that are explained, either one is a valid one to use. Now this section, section 3D, this is an area where if you have a method with another agency, which means an agreement with another agency where they may be providing services for Part C families, or where you may be using your federal Part C funds for them to provide those services, such as agreements you might have with your school of the deaf and blind, that type of thing. You would list those agencies here and then specify the dollar amounts and then the purpose of you using your federal funds to support that agency. If you have any other uses of your federal Part C funds, so for example, you have an at-risk program where you might be using federal funds, then you might have some information that you would provide here in section 3E, and then 3F is the totals page. Sure looks familiar to all of you, except what we have highlighted in yellow, which is new for 2024, which is a question about subgranting. So it's a simple yes or no question. Answer it to the best of your ability. We're just trying to get a gauge on how many programs consider themselves to be subgranting so that we in turn can provide the appropriate TA to you. So that's the other thing that was just added to the Part C documents that are now with OMB. Section 4 deals with your system of payments. That's at the top of the form. So it's asking for a yes response if you have a system of payment policy. Everybody at this point bills insurance, as far as we can tell, whether it's Medicaid, Medicaid, and private insurance. So you would be saying yes, that you have a system of payments policy. And then if you charge indirect costs to the Part C program, you would specify that in section 4B, where you would tell us what instrument you use, if it's a restricted indirect cost rate or cost allocation plan. If you do not charge indirect costs, then there's a response for that too, where you tell us, no, you don't charge indirect costs. If you're not sure what you do, I know we have some new Part C coordinators, and many times Part C and their fiscal offices don't necessarily communicate the way we'd like. So if you don't know, then please reach out to us and we can help you figure that out. If you charge indirect costs, then we want you to provide, though, that documentation. So we should have an updated RICR on file or cost allocation plan. All right, there are two FAQ documents that we referenced last year as well, and those are tied to prior approvals. So the first one came out in 2019 and talked about equipment. That was the one thing I didn't mention when I mentioned rent, participant support costs, and construction. Equipment is also one of those requirements where you have to seek OSEP approval, depending upon how much you're spending for equipment. So you have the 2019 document, and then you have the newer document that came out last year, which provided some flexibilities around prior approvals for equipment and participant support costs. So make sure you read those and refresh your memory on those requirements. Again, if you have any questions related to the application, the GEPA form, significant disproportionality, participant support costs, policies, please reach out to us. We like to address these questions sooner than later so that when the applications come in May, we know that we have a substantially approvable document and can go forward and create your grant letter and get your funds to you on July 1st. And remember that if you have any errors, we can talk with you and go back and forth with you until the documents are substantially approvable. In addition, if your state agency, and this is particularly for Part C programs, if your state agency is thinking about a lead agency change and you have not notified us, please let us know about that as soon as possible, because that has implications for your grant application. If there's been a change in leadership, whether you're Part B or Part C program, if you're a new coordinator, new state director, if you have a new lead agency head, please let us know that too, so that we can update our contact database. All the information I shared today will be in the grant memos that we will send as soon as we can. And with that, I will close and pass it to Dan Schreier. My contact information is here. You can call or email me if you have any questions. Thank you. Dan?
Thank you, Jennifer. So as Greg mentioned at the beginning of the call, right, is that we've been working really hard over the past several years to really talk about some basic fundamental requirements of IDA, whether it's the IEP, thinking about specific factors that need to be considered in an IEP, requirements for IFSPs, transition, right? Some of these really sort of fundamental requirements, and then trying to think very broadly about our guidance and being able to share it with a wide audience and a wide group of individuals. And you can see the 3 bullets here we have, right? Is once again, is sharing that information and trying to do it in a way that's a little different, right? Looking at our guidance, I don't know if we've done a myth fact in a long time, maybe ever. And so love to get people's feedback, right? And if you have any feedback on the guidance and whether you thought it was helpful or useful or more readable, and this way we'd love to have it. So please contact your state contact when you have any of those grant questions, and please let us know about the guidance as well. This would be really helpful. We do have a QR code to the guidance. We've got a bunch of QR codes in this presentation. They should work. For this one, if the QR code doesn't work, it is on our ida.ed.gov website. So please check it out. Right. So while myself, our colleagues in the Office of Educational Technology, colleagues in the Research Practice Division were working on the guidance, we were pleasantly surprised to see that the Assistive Technology Act was reauthorized last year. It was late last year in December of 20. I guess it's actually 2 years ago, December 2022, as part of the omnibus budget package. There was an insertion about the reauthorization of the AT Act. If you haven't seen what the AT Act looks like, it is in that QR code. One of the things that I've noticed, right, in looking at it, that when it was last reauthorized, which was in 2004, it was very similar to the reauthorization of IDA. So, for example, states who, the state offices that receive AT Act funds, they have to submit an annual performance report. There's TA centers. There's a lot of emphasis on collaboration, focusing on transitions and recognizing the importance of obviously AT for all individuals with disabilities, but there's a lot of emphasis talking about collaboration between schools and early intervention. So if you're into statutes and checking it out, there's a link to the most recent authorized edition of the Assistive Technology Act. Just as a recollection, for those of you who may remember, we used to have the oversee the Assistive Technology Act in OSERS. It was part of our office, and then when WIOA was reauthorized, I think in 2014, the Assistive Technology Act implementation went over to the Health and Human Services. Right, and as Greg mentioned too, we did try to cast our guidance to a very wide audience. We've been sort of following the press releases, and it's been picked up that way, right? And talked about that. We really tried to disseminate this to virtually everyone who works with kids and disabilities and infants and toddlers as well. So we did try to cast it as broadly as we possibly could. And we're thinking that making it in a more sort of user-friendly and easier to read format, it'll help in making sure that sort of our broad list of stakeholders in the slide will be able to access it and get a better understanding of IDA's AT Act requirements or AT requirements. So if you haven't seen our definition of assistive technology, right, it's two parts. We sometimes think, or that's one of the myths that we try to dispel, is that assistive technology consists of both devices and services, right? And these definitions are both in IDA Part B and Part C. Their assistive technology device and service are definitions in the definition section of our regulations. For Part C, it's part of the definitions of it's one of the early intervention services. So that's when 34 CFR 303.13. I believe it's because it's alphabetical, assistive technology would be the first definition there. So, with the exception, obviously, that it's talking about an infant and toddler. But it really is important. I think that was a really important myth, and we'll talk about a little more, is just because you provide a child or an infant and toddler with an assistive technology device doesn't mean that they're going to be able to use it. And that's where the services come in. Right. So this is, going back to my opening statement, right, is that if you look at our requirements in 300-324 regarding the specific factors that IEP teams must consider for every child, right? This is a requirement, a global requirement. It needs, the assistive technology needs have to be considered for every child. So it should be highlighted. It should make sure that, if you're providing TA to your LEAs or asking questions, they're getting questions about the technology, this should be a front and center requirement and needs to be considered at every IEP team. It's not a universal requirement under Part C, but it definitely is one of the, it does have to be, thought about as appropriate, right? So it's not a universal consideration, but for infants and toddlers that do need assistive technology as part of their IFSP, it should be provided. And then obviously, as a child transitions from Part C to Part B, definitely would have to think about the IEP requirements and transitioning in and thinking about how to potentially deploy AT devices and services for that preschooler. Right. And so just putting the sort of the requirements aside, right, thinking about how important assistive technology is, right? And we do include a bunch of research in the guidance, but it really does show that it makes a huge difference, right? It is not something that, should be considered as like cheating or making it easier for a child with a disability to be successful. No, it really does make a huge difference in their ability to receive FAPE, ability to receive education in least restrictive environment. It makes a real big difference in their ability to lead a meaningful and full and productive life. Regards to infants and toddlers, I don't know if you've ever seen some videos. You can definitely look at them online of watching infants and toddlers working with their parents and a related service provider, like a speech therapist, physical therapist with assistive technology devices. It's really cool to see. So it really should not be thought of as just a school-aged service, but it definitely has a can be applied for infants and toddlers as well. So one of the other sort of big misconceptions is that it was interesting as I was listening in on a call at the World Bank today where they're talking about assistive technology, and they were all focusing, it seemed like, on the high tech side, right? Where, costing out those very expensive, potentially AT devices. But one of the things that we really wanted to stress in this guidance, right, is that it's, AT devices can potentially cost a couple of dollars and can be equally effective. So, we've broken it up into those three categories. It's generally kind of accepted what has been categorized. wanted to make sure that there's a full range of potential assistive technology devices available, and they should not all be significantly expensive, right? We think that many children and disabilities are actually utilizing those low-tech AT devices, and it's making a big difference in their lives. So here's an example. I don't know if you've looked at the guidance, but if you have, this is sort of one of those myths and facts that we used, but making sure, and this sort of does the tie-in between the AT device and the AT service, where, even though our, kids have much better knowledge with potentially those high-tech devices than we do as an adults, right? I've reached that age where I know there's lots of technology coming by and I'm just not able to keep up with it, and it is bypassing me, and that's okay. But at the same time, we have to make sure that that LEA staff have actually provide the support to the child, that they can actually use it, that they actually need to train potentially additional staff members, like people like me who are not becoming tech unsavvy, so that we can actually support the child in using the AT device. And we call those AT services. That's what the definition, if you look at that definition of AT services in Part B or Part C, that's what it's referring to. And so here's some more of those examples, right, that we do. There is something called the AT evaluation, which is an AT service. And we've been providing guidance on AT evaluations, I think, going back for 30 years now. So definitely may be needed, something to be considered. And we're going to sort of jump into how AT centers potentially can help with those evaluations as well. And so this is something new that we actually, recognizing so that many kids are very comfortable with, for example, their iPhone or their iPad, which potentially could be used as an AT device. Obviously, IDA talks about the requirement that this service is provided at FAPE and must be provided to the child. But could it be possible that the IEP team determines that, based on the child's comfort with a specific device, that that they would potentially, use their own device as that AT device? And here's some considerations that we thought of and created. And I think this is the first time we've ever kind of commented on this. Obviously, these are not an IDA, but it's definitely worth considering if LEAs are having those IEP meetings, and there's the consideration that, the family wants the child to bring their own device and use that as assistive technology. So this is in the guidance, definitely worth considering, and would want your feedback on this as well. So as this will tie into back to what Jennifer and Lucille were talking about, the grant application. So as part of those interactive spreadsheets, we've been compiling all the information. And so one of the uses of state level funds is to support the use of technology, including assistive technology. And you can see how much last year states reserved for this category for state level funds. And then you can see the total amount that was reserved for state level activities. So, and like I said, another great resource that back when I was in a school district, I wish I had known about this, but each state and every outlying area has to have an AT Act, has an AT Act program. They have technical assistance centers, and they do some really amazing things, right? So they can be a great consult. They can be a great resource for that IEP team to talk about potential assistive technology devices. They can actually loan out devices, which is a really fantastic feature. They can't buy material. They're statutorily prohibited to actually buy assistive technology for a specific individual with a disability, but they can loan out materials, and then sort of help support the school district as they think about procuring an assistive technology. So that's the QR code. If you click on that, it'll actually take you to the website that shows all the different AT Act state websites and the resources that you can actually, if you're not aware of them, we'll be able to access them and share them as a great resource. We did work pretty collaboratively with Health and Human Services on the guidance to make sure that we were actually really accurate in describing what these TA centers can and cannot provide. And then finally, here are some links to some TA centers, either through, for example, the AT Act programs. Those are those TA centers. I think the AT3 Center is the global TA provider. We then have some OSEP funded TA centers. And obviously our parent center. And then finally, we always want to give a shout out to our placemat that shows all our different TA centers. And this is my last slide. So we're excited we got this out. Really hoping that it'll be disseminated widely. And looking forward to any follow-up questions you may have. Probably not in today's presentation, but if there are any questions of implementation, definitely get a shout out to your state leads, your project officers, and we can circle back. So I don't know, do we turn it back to Greg to help close out the meeting, or is that?
No, I'll be happy to close it out, Dan.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for your presentation, and also thank you, Jennifer and Lucille, for talking to us about how to apply for your Part B or Part C IDEA formula grant application this year. If you have any specific questions, I think Jennifer did put her email address up there on the screen, but if not, you could put your questions in the Q&A, and Shoshona will collect all those and get those to us. Wanted to remind you that this is the first of 2 technical assistance calls that we're having in February. Our next one is Thursday, February 22nd, also at 4 p.m. And during that call, we will introduce various resources and information that can support states in your efforts to eliminate the personnel shortages that we know most of you are facing right now. We know every infant, toddler, child, and youth with a disability should have access to outstanding, well-prepared, well-supported educators and service providers who reflect the diversity of the students that they serve. So we will have speakers from various offices describing some resources and information that may help you in your state. And again, that's Thursday, the 22nd at 4 o'clock. So with that, I will close out that call, and thanks everybody for participating today.